Greetings, people of the interwebs, and welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you again from my undisclosed location in Midwest USA with more historic knowledge. A little fun fact about me is that I love traditional shaving. That's right, I do not use a cartridge razor and some canned goop that smells like the inside of a hospital. No, I shave like a real man. That's right, and you better learn too, to all the men listening. It's a much better quality shave, and it's much cheaper to just use one single blade rather than a multitude of blades and some canned foam. I use a double-edged razor blade with shaving soap and a shaving brush. And if you're wondering what this has to do with American history, I thought that this week's episode should be about the history of the safety razor, because I wanted to dispel some common myths around the safety razor. And starting with some myths to dispel, contrary to popular belief, the safety razor was not invented by King C. Gillette. The first patent for a device similar to a safety razor was issued in 1847 to a man named William Henson. His shaving device was a long handle on which would be placed a toothed guard which would hold a razor blade, resembling somewhat the form of a common hoe, according to his patent. And when I say hoe, I mean the gardening or farming tool that's used to chop up weeds. Get your mind out of the gutter, people. You sickos. However, Henson never produced his device, and it was never marketed, which is probably why he is not very well known in regards to safety razors. Henson is better known for his contributions to aircraft. He produced one of the first successful hand gliders. And that's why for the next several decades, men were shaving with straight razors, which were basically knives. And many men were afraid of cutting themselves, so they either grew beards or just went to barbershops. That's probably why so many men during the Civil War grew beards. I've always wanted to try to shave with a straight razor, but I know I better not because my hands are too shaky and I do not want to go to the hospital. And the straight razor remained the king until the 1880s, when two German brothers, Matthias and Robert Kampfe, immigrated to the United States and took up barbering. They were successful, but they wanted a better and easier way to shave. And in 1875, they patented their idea. The Kampfe brothers' idea was to take what was basically a section of a straight razor blade and put it on a guard which was on a handle, and then a man would shave using that. However, these were not like the safety razors we have today. The blades required just as much upkeep as traditional straight razors did. The razor blades had to be stropped, they had to be sharpened. There was very little difference from a traditional straight razor, only that there was a guard to protect your face. This was also some 20 years before King C. Gillette would make the scene. It's also important to note these razors were single-edged, like a traditional straight razor. The Kampfe brothers remained king until 1898, when an employee of theirs named Jerry Reichardt left the Star Safety Razor Company, as the Kampfe brothers had called their company, and formed his own corporation to manufacture safety razors. The company was called the Jim Safety Razor Company, and they created the first disposable single-edged safety razor blade. Now, the single-edged blade that they came up with will look familiar if you've ever seen paint scrapers. It was one single piece of steel that had a spine on it that would be put into the razor, and then you'd shave with that, like a paint scraper or a box cutter razor. And these razor blades can still be purchased for single-edged safety razors under the name Perasso, which is owned by the American Safety Razor Company, which is sadly not a sponsor, although if they would like to sponsor me, I will gladly take it. This is definitely the cutting edge of history, and it was also around the time of Jim that a new man would rise. It was around this time that a gentleman by the name of King C. Gillette was experimenting to get his idea off the ground. Gillette was from an enterprising family, to say the least. His mother was the author of the first White House cookbook, and his father invented a new type of safety valve for water. Gillette was born in 1855 in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and grew up in Chicago. Most of his family had left Chicago after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, but he remained in Chicago. He later found a job as a traveling salesman for the Crown Cork and Seal Company when he was just 16 years old, after he met William Painter, the inventor of the disposable bottle cap. Gillette was an oddity because he not only sold his wares, he also improved them. And by 1890, he had been issued 4 patents, thanks in no small part by his employer, William Painter. One day, Painter gave Gillette some advice to invent something that could only be used once and then thrown away. This was quite a novel idea at the time when people would hang on to things for many years. Painter thought great money could be made off of something that people could only use once and then have to buy another one of. And Gillette got inspiration for such an idea in a rather unlikely place. By definition, a traveling salesman must travel, and that's exactly what was happening. While on a train car, Gillette was about to shave with a star safety razor because it would be downright treacherous to shave with a straight razor on a moving train. One bump and you're done for. And he noticed that the blade was too dull, and he knew if he sharpened it, it would be too sharp and he was liable to cut himself. And he wondered if a blade could be made that could be used and then thrown away, and then another one can be used in its place. He set out to work toward the end of the century, the 1890s. The next few years were hard, to say the least. Gillette had the idea to put an edge on both sides of a piece of stamped sheet metal, which would then be placed in a T-shaped holder, and that would be what was used to shave. Like so many inventors before him, Gillette was mocked relentlessly. No one thought it would be possible to put an edge on a piece of sheet metal. It'd be too soft. It got so bad, people would often greet him by saying, "Well, Gillette, how's the razor?" And they all knew the answer was, it wasn't going well. But things were about to turn in Gillette's favor. Shortly after the turn of the century in 1900, Gillette met a man named William Emery Nickerson. Nickerson was an MIT-trained engineer who was no stranger to difficult projects. He once manufactured light bulbs using a process that Thomas Edison didn't think was possible, and he thought Gillette's idea might work if he got the right kind of metal. While Gillette was an enterprising man, he had no knowledge of metallurgy. Nickerson was very knowledgeable with the metallurgic arts. Many of their experiments failed until, legend says, when Nickerson noticed Gillette's sandwich during a lunch break, he wondered if maybe he could make layers of metal and use that to make the razor blades. Quite a sharp idea, if you ask me. And so, using layers of steel, copper, and other metals I can't remember, Nickerson made the sheet metal and stamped it. They then used a machine the two of them had dubbed the merry-go-round to sharpen it, and to their surprise, it took an edge very well and could be used to shave. And Gillette patented his safety razor in 1901. And interestingly, the Gillette Safety Razor Company was almost the Nickerson Safety Razor Company after the man who helped create the razor blade. However, the name got the axe because Gillette thought it would be reminiscent of nicked skin or cuts. However, people were slow to catch on to Gillette's new razor. During the first year of operation, the Gillette Company sold 51 razors and 168 blades. However, things changed in 1903 when Gillette sold 91 razors at $5 apiece and more than 10 million razor blades. And in case anyone is wondering, $5 in 1903 would be roughly about $183 today, so this is probably why a lot of people were still shaving with straight razors. And people saw the disposable razors as such a novelty, Gillette first offered resharpening for his razor blades during the first few years of his company. And interestingly, when Gillette's patent expired, the single-edge razor blades companies, the American Safety Razor Company and the Gem Safety Razor Company, began selling their razors for only $1 apiece. Gillette's sales did not dip, however, though. In 1909, the company manufactured 2 million razors and tens of millions of razor blades. Not too shabby, if you ask me. Gillette also would see another boom during the First World War, as King C. Gillette had a contract with the U.S. Army to supply razor blades and razors. In the trench warfare days, when mustard gas was being used in the Great War, a tight seal was needed for the gas mask, and facial hair got in the way, so the U.S. Army contacted the Gillette Safety Razor Company to manufacture razors and blades for the U.S. Army, and that's exactly what they did. Gillette supplied khaki sets to the U.S. Army to be sure that the troops stayed clean-shaven. And the men brought their safety razors home, and this led to a new generation of shavers. And interestingly, when the Gillette patent expired, Gillette had an idea to change the razor blade configuration. You see, the first Gillette razor blade had 3 holes in it, and when they were manufactured the second time, the patent was changed so Gillette had the 3 holes connected. And he decided that this would be a great way to make sure that his patent stayed valid. The razor holder would stay basically the same, but the blades would change. However, Gillette was smart enough to have all the 1 year's razor blades could be used with the previous year's razors. This way, the razors could always stay sharp. Well, that about wraps up all the time we have for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this little romp through American history. Once again, I'm your host, Luke Johnson, telling you stay sharp and be sure to switch to traditional shaving. You get a much better bang for your buck. I mean, my skin's never felt better. So once again, thank you for bearing with me into this history lesson. Goodbye and God bless.